Okay, hi everybody. Video number 5, degree 5, lecture 5. Leaving where we, or beginning where we left off from the previous video. Um, Start off now by showing my sources so that you can see them. The sources in this video are going to be Scare, Chris, general editor, along with many other contributors of the book called Past Worlds, by published by HarperCollins, the Atlas of Archaeology Times Books, 1997. And then we'll be using Colin McEvedy and Richard Jones, Atlas of World Population History by Penguin Book Harmonsworth, 1978. We'll be using Nia Jablonski, The Anthropology of Skin Colors, an examination of the evolution of skin pigmentation and the concept of race and skin color. Also, P.E. Wheeler, The Evolution of Bipedality and Loss of Functional Body Hair in Hominids. And last will be A.H. Zillman and B.A. Kahn, The Adaptive Response of Human Skin to the Savannah. Okay, so those 5 will be included in this lecture. Okay, so last time we ended with looking at this map here about the early human-like species that were outside of Africa during the Miocene period, the middle Miocene. We said that during the earliest Miocene, fossils have only been found in East Africa. And then about 5 million years later, well, fossils dated to about 5 million years later have been found outside of Africa in these particular areas in red. Okay, so we're going to discuss that now, and I'll just be reading from my book here. The southern out of Africa route was taken this early. The southern out of African route was taken this early to leave Africa, which means right here, this used to be connected, like I said in my last video. Yemen and Djibouti and Eritrea used to be connected, and the upper part where the Sinai Peninsula was actually open, so they weren't able to cross there. So they crossed through this southern route. It was an obvious choice because of its closeness to East Africa and the fact that the Arabia Peninsula actually joined to Africa here, while at the northern route near Palestine the land was separated by water. These areas seen in the map are where the earliest fossils are found outside of Africa. They are found in modern-day Turkey, Spain, France, and China, and northern India along the upper Indus Valley, all shown in red in the picture above. So we're talking about here Spain, France, Turkey, and if you can see this, India, and this small area here in China. If you can't see that, let me move it over. It's hard for me to know if you guys can see it or not, but there's this small area here in the tip of China. The fossils of Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus have been found and dated to between 11 and 13 million years ago. If we compare that to proconsul, that's 25 million years ago, that's more than 10 million, which was found in East Africa. That's more than 10 million years later. If you just can imagine that 10 million years later, okay? Um, Found in India and Southeast Asia. Further west in Europe and also seen in red around the Pyrenees Mountains between Spain and France and along the Swiss Alps, Dryopithecus fossils have been found, also dated in the Miocene period. So that's right here in between Spain. These are the Pyrenees Mountains chain that separates France and Spain, and that's where Dryopithecus has been found. They are more like proconsul but are not related to any of the living hominoids. Finally, in the Far East, in China, at the site called Lufeng, Sivapithecus and Ramapithecus fossils have also been found, but that have been dated to much later in the late Miocene period. So that's this small area in China. Proconsul, Kenyapithecus, and some undetermined fossils are the majority of fossils found in East Africa and are the earliest anywhere yet found. They span the whole Miocene period from roughly 25 million years ago until 5 million years ago. These are all non-hominids but thought to be the ancestors of them. The Miocene is followed by the Paleolithic period dating from after about 5 million years ago, where more accurate information can be found, and where these early ape-like species begin to become more human-like. Paleolithic sites that have been found by researchers show evidence of the sites being used for things such as food preparation and food storage, even at this early of a date. Some sites were specifically picked to extract the natural resources that were found there or to work the techniques of stone tool creation. Collection of exotic or unique items found from the earth, like certain mineral rocks, stones, plants, fruits, etc., were probably traded amongst the earliest species. They built their own beds out of materials found from the surrounding areas, and they built hearths or designated areas for fires, which was probably more common in the cold of Europe than in Africa. Fire use dates back to at least 600,000 years ago. That's evidence that they found. That doesn't mean that it doesn't go back farther than that. Sites were probably chosen for their food and water availability more than for anything else. Since the beginning of human evolution, we can see human settlements are around lakes and rivers. Some sites may have been seasonal, and humans seem to have moved around from place to place based on the seasons and the resources that they found, but they didn't move very far because they would return to the same sites again. The highly misunderstood notion of the now termed gather hunterers, which for the longest time was hunter gatherers, tends to make the average person think that the family groups were constantly moving from one place to the next all of the time, which is highly unlikely and which is just outright not necessary even back then. Seasonally would mean that they remained in one spot for at least several months at a time compared to today, where some people may move on a yearly basis based on a job, or for financial reasons, or for a preferred location, which are usually those people living in apartments whom don't own a home. So when they moved around, they didn't move like super far. They would move a couple miles, and then if they came from a good site where during a certain season they can find food and they know there were water, would return back there again when that season came up again. So it's not like they, like what I thought was they're just constantly like moving around, you know, for miles and miles and miles to new places all the time. That's not. I want to make that understood that that's not what happened. Once they learned specific skills on how to better exploit their own environments and to get what they needed for their own needs, they may have stayed even longer in a comfortable place free of danger as their family size grew. Sizes of groups probably numbered on average from 25 to 50 members. Of course, the materials that they would have used at such an early time would mostly degrade and would become hard for us to find today. Their shelters were hut like, weaved together in a circular fashion with beds and fires, which can be seen even today in the last remaining hunter gatherer societies. Those with higher intelligence and better skills would have fared better compared to others. Their ability to adapt to a changing environment would have given them an advantage and may have earned themselves admirers and followers who may have been accepted into the family as a friend. Those who were larger and stronger, or whom had larger family sizes, could have used these things in order to gain an advantage over the weak, sending the weak into hiding or extinction, which we know happened several times over history. Of course, mating would have been on preference, with many unfavored genetics dying out. According to the Atlas of World Population History, it's estimated that during the time of the publishing of the book in 1978, that the gorilla population was approximately 70,000 and about 1 per square kilometer, while at the same time, the chimpanzee population was 3 to 4 per square kilometer, and probably well over a million. The authors say that these numbers, 70,000 and 1 million, can be used as the lower and upper limits of the Australopithecine population of 2 to 3 million years ago. They also estimate the population of Homo erectus, who existed at about 1.5 million years ago, to be at about 1.7 million people, or at 1 per 100 kilometers. Interestingly, they attribute the lower density to digestion and resynthesis having an efficiency of only a few percent as the Homo species moved from being herbivores to carnivore diets. The population declined per unit area. So that's interesting that when they switched to eating meat, the population got smaller. Obviously because they were dying out earlier. They say gorillas are pure herbivores munching their way through the forest, while primitive man always retained some vegetable elements in his diet, which often dominated his diet but later became about 50% carnivore. They continue saying that these population figures are supported by the Aborigine population of Australia who live at a Paleolithic time in this day. They estimate the population at 10,000 BCE to be at about 4 million people, which is double what it was in 100,000 BCE. Therefore, in the beginning times of our own species, the Homo sapiens population could be estimated to be around 2 million individuals spread out over eastern and northeastern Africa because they had not left yet during this time, or just about this time, roughly at about 120,000 to 140,000 years ago. It would still take several thousands of years before modern humans would leave the continent and survive outside of it. So that sounds kind of confusing. The first estimates of people, our own species, leaving Africa is between 120,000 years ago to 140,000 years ago. Those people died out. They didn't survive, and then the group that survived after that came at about 80,000 years ago. It is not necessary to go into great detail over human skin color and hair. The word race by now should be seen as obsolete. Ethnicities or cultures split by geographic regions is more appropriate for distinguishing different types of people. Everyone is related to everyone else. We are one species, however, probably evolving into several different species at the moment based on gene mutations. You should be surprised to find out that in the future, scientists will begin to say we have several different human species living on Earth at the same time, while one is visibly seen dominating. Genetics wasn't known back then, therefore, they couldn't separate species by genes and had to rely on physical characteristics. Skin color is largely based on one's environment, mainly sun exposure, also on how the angle of the sun hits the earth, the climate of the region they live in, and their diets. As far as hair is concerned, according to Zillman and Cohn, humans in the savannas of Africa developed fully functional thermoregulatory eccrine sweat glands that led to the reduction of most body hair. Also, this allowed the body and brain to cool. Hair reduction resulted in darker skin pigmentation in order to protect from UVR sun rays. They go on to say that once humans became bipedal, they were able to run more and sweating occurred, and that light skin was needed in the northern latitudes in order for the body to be able to synthesize the important vitamin D. Skin color in particular is regulated by eumelanin from UVR penetration into the skin, which affects the rates of photodegradation of folate and of photosynthesis of vitamin D in the skin. The earliest Homo sapiens evolved in equatorial Africa and had dark pigmented skin rich in natural melanin sunscreen. Moving away from the equator activated natural selection as far as skin color is concerned and favored depigmentation. Genes adapted over time and skin color phenotypes evolved, creating different pigment genes. Wheeler says man's brain lacks an effective carotid rete, leaving them vulnerable to thermal damage during elevated body temperature. Thus, a cooling system constituting a naked body with cutaneous sweat glands exists. He also brings up the argument of man's bipedalism and how it caused less direct sunlight, meaning sunlight now concentrated at the top of the head instead of the back, which resulted in less body hair seen in savanna quadrupeds, but hair remained on the top of the head. Those nearer to the equator have thick, coiled together hair on top of their heads that blocks the sun. Okay, I'm going to stop right there for this video. So we discussed the locations of the earliest fossils found outside of Africa. So if anybody asks you, you can say Spain, France, Turkey, India, China. And we discussed the populations of the earliest humans. We discussed their diet. We discussed um, skin color and how did humans lose their hair. So those are all very important things that we need to know, that if you're really thinking about origin of man and evolution, that you're gonna wonder about those things and they're gonna come up, because I wondered about them. So that's why I had to research them, so I knew, and now I have that information, and now I know what happened, and I don't have to think about it anymore. I can tell somebody, hey, this is what happened. This is why we lost our. This is why skin color became light. This is why we lost our hair. Human diet was not carnivore at first. It became carnivore, and when it became carnivore, people started dying earlier. Um, and the fossils that have been found so far, um, the earliest ones are in East Africa, and they're not found that early anywhere else in the world. Okay, so that's it for now. Please do me a favor and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, let me know. Leave a comment or something. And thank you very much. Bye for now.